such as migration lines, which will help you plan your transitions effectively. We'll also discuss support preferences for so we'll also discuss support preferences.
Akshay, you're on mute.
Yeah, am I audible? Yeah. So I'll just start again. So in today's session, we will explore essential topics such as migration timelines, which will help you plan your transitions effectively. We'll also discuss support preferences for OpenGTK, ensuring you understand your options for long-term sustainability. As we know that the decision-making process can be complex. So throughout our session, we'll address the key factors influencing your choices as well as the various levels of technical support available to you. I believe cost optimization is another crucial area we'll cover as we strive to help you maximize your investments. Finally, we'll highlight critical features such as security updates, indemnification, which are vital for protecting your organization. We'll take another 10 minutes to address the questions that you have. And in case you have any questions during the discussion, you can type in the questions in the chat box. So let's kick off with introduction. So I'm Akshay. I've been part with Silver Leaf Solutions for a year and a half, having experience of a rewarding journey of learning along the way. I'm serving the role of a business development representative here. Along with me, I have my team members Vishali, Prerna, Vanshika, and Priyanshu. We are privileged to have with us Mr. Mayank Srivastava, the founder and CEO at Silver Leaf Solutions, and Sushrit Parthi, Vice President for Business Development Strategy. They have an cumulative experience of 30 years across multiple OEMs. And we are honored to have Simon Ritter here with us. He is the Deputy CTO at Azul Systems. He's based from UK, a prominent figure in the technology industry known for his expertise in Java and JVM technologies. Simon is a Java champion and a two-time recipient of the Java One Rockstar Award. In addition, he represents Azul on the JCP Executive Committee, the OpenGTK Vulnerability Group, and the JSR Expert Group. So now allow me to provide a brief overview of Silverleaf Solutions. So this organization was established in 2016, headquartered in Gurgaon, and we are a global independent and research-based organization specializing in software licensing advisory and cost optimization services. Our primary aim is to help clients optimize cost associated with various multi-year software licensing contracts of tier 1 and tier 2 publishers. We are operating across India, US, Singapore, and UAE. We take pride in our expanding footprints of our valuable 8-year history, serving a diverse customer base worldwide. So let's talk about today's webinar. So we will discuss about the recent licensing changes that was incorporated by Oracle in the Java ecosystem, which has led to substantial price increase in the Java licensing. So due to this massive cost impact, as you can see in the screen, approx 72% of Java users are now considering alternatives to Oracle. So Azul is one such options to replace Oracle's Java runtime environment with an alternative version called OpenGDK. So with our partnership with Azul, we can help you offer a Java platform that's financially and strategically smart. So thank you so much for joining us. And without further delay, let's dive into today's discussion. Now I request Simon to take the discussion forward. Over to you, Simon.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me just share my slides. Right, hopefully you can see my slides.
Yes, it is visible.
Okay, good. Right. Okay, so let's get started then. Yes. So as Akshay said, we've seen a lot of changes in terms of the way that Oracle both license and price the Java that they provided. And realistically, in the last 5 years, there have been 4 changes. Initially, they introduced the idea of having to pay for Java if you were using it in commercial applications, which is what had never been done before. And then most recently, in January last year, they changed the way that they price Java. Rather than billing you based on how much Java you were using, so the number of desktops or the number of cores and number of servers, they said, let's make that simple and let's just bill you based on how many people you employ. And that's full-time employees, part-time employees, contractors, and even people from third-party companies that are overseeing your IT infrastructure. And that has led to some people seeing astronomical increases in the price of their Java usage. So what we're going to talk about today is some of the myths around if you want to move from Oracle to someone else. And if you want to move to a different OpenJDK distribution, such as the one that we provide from Azul called Zulu. So the first myth that I want to address is that Oracle Java is somehow different to OpenJDK. Now, OpenJDK is the open source project for the development of Java. And the analogy that I like to use here is like Linux. Linux is an open source project for the development of the Linux operating system, and OpenJDK is the project where we develop Java. So what is OpenJDK? Well, it is open source. It's the open source code for the Java platform. And right now, the way that this works is that we see a new version of OpenJDK being released every 6 months. This is something that's changed since 2018. So in March and September, so literally last month, we saw the release of JDK 23. Now, the really important thing about this is that OpenJDK is just source code. So you can't download an OpenJDK distribution from OpenJDK. You have to go to somebody else. Somebody else has to build the source code and make it available to you. Again, if we think about Linux, it's very unlikely that you would go to linux.org, download the source code, build it, and then install it on your machine. What you're going to do is go to somebody like Red Hat or Ubuntu or SUSE and use their distribution. Absolutely the same thing applies to Java. So what we see, if I show this diagram here, is OpenJDK is this project, and lots of people contribute to this. It's important to understand that it's not just Oracle who are developing Java. Lots of other companies, lots of other individuals contribute to this as an open source project. Amazon have engineers that contribute things. Red Hat have engineers, IBM, Microsoft. There are many different companies involved, and of course Azul. So we contribute a lot of code to this project. Now, what we then see is that people can take that source code and then they can build it, package it all together, and create a distribution, which is what you can then install on your machine and run your Java applications on. And the great thing about this is it means that you now have a bigger choice than we had previously. What we've seen since Oracle changed the licensing of Java is a proliferation of different distributions of OpenJDK. As you can see at the bottom here, you've got the one from Corretto, or the Corretto one, which is the one from Amazon. You run on AWS. You can use it outside of AWS, but it's not supported. There's one from Temrim by Adoptium, which is part of the Eclipse Foundation. Again, that's free, but it's not supported. You've got both Platform Core from Azul, which is our replacement for the OpenJDK, and we also have another version called Platform Prime. I'm not going to talk about that today, but that's a high-performance JDK. And then, of course, you've got Oracle. So you have many choices, and there are more than this. There are other versions as well. Now, if we look at the reality, how do we know that these things are the same? If I want to move from one version of Java to another version of Java, how do I know that my applications are going to run in the same way? And the great thing about Java is that it has not just an open source project like Linux, but unlike Linux, it has a formal standard that defines exactly what Java is. And we have this thing called the Java Community Process, which is the standards body that oversees this. And for each version of Java, we have a Java specification request, or JSR. And the JSR consists of three things. Firstly, you've got the actual specification. What does Java consist of? You've got a definition of the language, so the syntax. You've got a definition of what the JVM must do, and you've got a definition of all the libraries that are included in the JDK. So that's the specification itself. Then we have a reference implementation, something that shows that that specification can actually be implemented. And that's what the OpenJDK project is, source code to the reference implementation. And the third thing, the important part, is that we have a technology compatibility kit, or TCK. And what this does is it provides a set of tests that you can run on a distribution that you've created. And so long as you pass every single one of those tests, you can say to somebody, I have provided a distribution of Java that you can run your applications on. As you can see here, depending on which version you have, this can be up to 150,000 tests. That gives you a very, very high level of confidence that if you take an application running on one TCK tested distribution of OpenJDK, like Oracle, and you move it to another TCK tested distribution of OpenJDK, like Azul, then you know that your application is going to run in exactly the same way. The behavior will be no different because same starting point in terms of source code, fully tested against all of these tests, and you know that your application is going to run in the same way. So from that point of view, the myth that somehow Oracle Java is different to OpenJDK can be dispelled. We know that what we're dealing with in terms of the JDK is identical. However, I do have to be a little bit careful here because there are some things that we need to be aware of. And this is specifically desktop deployment technologies. And there are two of the sort of older things that were included in Java right from the very beginning, which not many people still use. And the specific things that we're talking about here are applets and Java Web Start. So applets run inside a browser. Very, very few people use these anymore. It's only very old applications that might still be involved in applets. Most people have switched to using HTML5, JavaScript, CSS. That's the way most people deliver these types of applications. But there are a few people who still use applets. Even Oracle no longer support the technology behind applets. So applets shouldn't be used, but there are ways of getting around that. The other thing which may still be used is Java Web Start, and that's a sort of combination of applets and desktop deployment, so that you can have an application running on your desktop, and every time you start it, it will check to see whether it's been updated from a server. Again, that was included in the Oracle JDK up to JDK 8, but not part of the OpenJDK open source project. There's a different alternative, again, open source, called ICT Web that we can use if that's the case. So from JDK 11, Oracle JDK is absolutely identical to the build that you would get from OpenJDK. For JDK 8, JDK 7, JDK 6, these two things, applets and Java Web Start, are a slight difference, but essentially we're dealing with exactly the same thing. Okay, so the second myth that I want to talk about is migrating from Oracle to OpenJDK is hard. Well, I mean, I've already said that essentially what we're dealing with is something which is identical. So realistically, it should be fairly easy to talk about this as a myth. Now, as I said, what we provide is an alternative build of OpenJDK. Our distribution is called Zulu, and we like to think of that as being an enhanced build of OpenJDK. As I said, it's fully TCK tested, except for JDK 6 and JDK 7. The reason being that once Oracle stops providing support for 6 and 7, they withdraw the license to the TCK. So even though we know that it would pass, we're not actually allowed to run the tests on that. In terms of the versions that we support, we go all the way back to the first version that was provided under an open source license. So that's JDK 6. And we support all of the long-term support versions as well. So we have JDK 6, JDK 7, JDK 8, 11, 17, and 21. We are the only company that still supports JDK 6 and JDK 7. We still have updates available. We still backport all the security fixes and the bug fixes that are relevant to those versions. So if people are using older Java, they can continue to use that in a safe and secure way. We provide very wide platform support as well in terms of 64-bit versions for Windows, Mac, and Linux. Some people, again, using things like Windows XP still, so we still have 32-bit versions for Windows and Linux. And then we also have things like Solaris, ARM32, and ARM64-bit. We provide all the same packages. So from that point of view, we can realistically treat the migration from Oracle JDK to Azul's Zulu OpenJDK in exactly the same way as if we were installing an update from Oracle. It's just to use the packages from Azul rather than the packages from Oracle. That way, the process is very simple. So we're dispelling that myth that it's complicated to move things across. Now, what we've done is to look at how this works, and we've done this with many hundreds of customers, and we've come up with a very simple approach to how to do a migration. Three-phase approach. The first is discovery, and that's simply trying to find all the places where you've installed Java, which versions of Java you've got, and even which updates you've got. Often, this can be the largest part of the migration process. Just finding where you're using Java. Java is now nearly 30 years old, so people have installed it over literally decades, and sometimes it's difficult to remember where they've installed it and what they installed it to be used for. If you're using things like Snow, Flexera, ServiceNow, then that becomes easier. But if not, we have some discovery scripts which you can use to find where you're using Java. Second phase is execution. So that's where you take the packages from Azul and you install them as if you were installing an update to your Java, just using our packages again rather than Oracle's, and the process is complete. So the execution is actually very straightforward, very simple. Validation is where you need to make yourself confident that having moved to Azul's Java, everything works in the same way. So any test that you might have that you want to run, maybe you've got regression tests for server-side applications, maybe just a set of smoke tests for desktop applications, then that's what you need to do for verification. And again, what we've done to help people understand this is we actually wrote a book. So I wrote the OpenJDK Migration for Dummies guide, and this goes through all of the details that I've just spoken about and explains how to approach the migration, how to plan for it, some of the things you might need to look at, because we talked about the desktop deployment technologies, things like Java Web Start, applets, that may require a little bit more work because it's not necessarily a drop-in replacement in the same way, because it's outside of OpenJDK. Then all of that is detailed in this book. You can download it from our website. It's a free PDF. You can read through it. The great thing is it's not a big book. It's only about 60 plus pages long. It's quite a small format, and you don't even need to read the whole book to understand what to do in terms of planning your migration. So I think it's fair to say that we can dispel the myth that it is complicated to move from Oracle to a different build of OpenJDK. Another myth that we see a lot is the myth that free Java is good enough. What about that? Well, as we know, there are several distributions of OpenJDK that are free. You can get Corretto from Amazon, and you can use it for free outside of AWS. You can get Temurin from the Eclipse Foundation, part of the Adoptium project. Same as Corretto, you can get the Microsoft JDK for use outside of the Azure cloud, and you can use that for free. So that sounds very good, not having to pay for Java. What are the drawbacks? Well, as we already mentioned, we've got long-term support releases, and it's important to understand that a long-term support release is a concept which doesn't apply to OpenJDK. OpenJDK, the open source project, doesn't have any concept of long-term support. All versions of Java are treated as equal, and it's really up to anybody who's a contributor to that OpenJDK project to decide if they want to continue providing updates to a particular version of Java and then maintaining it. So right now, what we see is that in terms of long-term support releases, JDK 8 was the first one, JDK 11, JDK 17, and JDK 21 are the current releases, and then the next one's going to be JDK 25. But what a long-term support release means depends purely on the distribution provider that you've got. So how long is a long-term support release depends on who you're getting it from, as to whether they will support it for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, however long. They make the decision about how long a long-term support release is. Another thing that's very important to understand is, in terms of being able to understand that free is not necessarily as good as a supported version, is around how updates are delivered. If you look at what Oracle will provide you under a commercial contract, you will get two different versions of each update. One's called the CPU, the other's called the PSU. CPU is security only update, critical patch update. Only contains the changes which are relevant to those security patches. Now, typically, that's going to be very small. It's going to be somewhere in the order of maybe 4 up to a maximum of 12, 15. That would be a very big set of changes in terms of the security only update. If we look at the PSU, or patch set update in Oracle terminology, that's the full update. So it contains all those security patches plus any other bug fixes, enhancements, other source code changes. And that can be 2, 3, even 400 changes. That's very significant, because if you're dealing with a set of changes which is only 4 or 6 versus 350 changes, there's a lot more possibility that if you deploy 350 changes to your JDK, that something in those changes may impact on the stability of your application. We've seen this quite a lot. So here's a summary of what we've seen since Oracle stopped providing free updates. So if you look at the updates that have been released, of the 22 updates so far, 6 of them have introduced a fix to a problem, but has then broken something else. As we know with software, it's very easy to change something. You think you're fixing one problem, but you actually introduce another problem. And you can see here that those 6 different updates had various levels of CVE associated with them. That's the security vulnerabilities, also how many vulnerabilities were addressed in there. And the important thing to look at here is the right-hand column. How long did it take for the problem to get resolved by the OpenJDK community? So anything from 2 weeks up to 38 days. So that's nearly 7.5 weeks. 7.5 weeks. And if you only have access to the full update, that means that you can't install that update if your application is affected by this particular problem. And you're potentially going to have to wait 7.5 weeks before you can update your systems. With that in mind, that means that any vulnerabilities, because remember that when an update comes out, all those vulnerabilities are published. People can look at the list, they can say, oh, look, that's an interesting vulnerability. We'll try and develop an exploit for that, find machines which haven't been patched, and then attack them. So 7.5 weeks is how long it takes to get something resolved. That's 7.5 weeks where people can work on trying to attack your systems. Because it's very important to understand that of all these updates that have been affected, none of the security only updates have had these problems. So if you had access to the security only update, you can then deliver that and get your systems as secure as possible. And what's important to understand here is that none of the free versions of Java will provide both of those updates. In fact, only Oracle and Azul provide both the CPU and the PSU. Everybody else provides just the PSU. So free means that you're potentially waiting weeks to be able to deploy an update if it has a problem that affects your applications. The other thing that I do get a lot from talking to customers is they say, well, support, why would I pay for support? I've never had to call Oracle support, so I don't think I need to pay for support for Java. And the way that I like to explain this is using this picture here of a very nice Lamborghini. Well, used to be a very nice Lamborghini that's clearly had an accident. And what I use as an analogy here is the idea of car insurance. So if you think about it, at the beginning of the year, you're driving a car, so you have to pay for car insurance. And you hope that at the end of the year, you haven't had an accident, nothing's happened to your car, and it doesn't look like this. So you've spent all that money and you've never had to use your insurance. And another year goes by, you've not used your insurance. Another year goes by, you've not used your insurance. Your car is fine. Everything is wonderful. But I would realistically ask, if after 3 years of not using your insurance at all, would you say to yourself, oh, okay, I haven't used my insurance for the last 3 years, I'm going to cancel my insurance? Probably not, because at some point in the future, you might have a situation, not your fault at all, somebody drives into you and suddenly you need your insurance to get your car repaired. The same thing applies with software, and Java specifically. It may be that you've never had to call Java support from Oracle, but that doesn't mean that in the future, remember that with these updates coming out 4 times a year, with potentially hundreds of changes, that at some point, something that changes in an update will affect only your application. Nobody else gets affected, it's quite possible, and suddenly you're left with a situation where you can't run your application if you install that update. There may be a critical vulnerability that has to be addressed, a 0-day vulnerability, something that really makes your systems exposed, and you can't install that update because either your system doesn't work or you're not secure. So at that point, you need to be able to call support, and that's why free is not necessarily good enough. So I think I can dispel that myth. Last myth, Oracle Java is more secure than OpenJDK. Right. Well, how does security updates get made available for Java? The way this works is, again, being an open source project. But this time, what Oracle have done is they've said, right, we need to make sure all the distributions are as secure as possible. And so we want to make access available to the security patches that are being developed. To do that, they created a group within OpenJDK called the Vulnerability Group. And this is even though it's an open source project, it's a closed group. So none of the email between the group is published. All of the work is encrypted, because what we're doing is developing the patches to vulnerabilities that haven't yet been resolved. We don't want to publish any of that information because that means that people then immediately know how they can attack the system, where they can develop exploits. So it's all kept very private, but it does mean that if you're a member of that group, you can then have access to the information as it's being developed. Azul is a member. Not all JDK providers are. And it means that we have visibility to all of the fixes as they're being developed because we help to develop those. When we need to make patches available, we already know what's going into a particular update, and we know that we can then take those security patches and backport them to the older versions that we support, like I say, all the way back to JDK 6. That gives us the time to be able to do the backporting, doing the building, running and passing all of the TCK tests to make sure that our builds are conforming to the standard. And that way we can make our builds available to our customers as quickly as possible. And to date, we've had our updates available to customers within 1 hour of Oracle. So Oracle's Java is no more secure than the builds that we can provide to our customers. So that's a really significant thing. It means that we can dispel the myth of the Oracle Java being more secure than other distributions, certainly Azul's distribution. And it's worth just looking at if you think to yourself, well, I won't bother updating my system because, surely security has been fixed by now. Well, if we look at this is a graph that I did where I looked at all the updates that have been provided since Oracle stopped providing free updates to a particular version of Java. JDK 6, good example. So it was in July, actually April 2013 when they stopped providing them. So the first one where there was no update available freely, then that was July 2013. If you haven't updated your JDK 6 system since then, because you haven't paid Oracle for support, you're exposed to 425 vulnerabilities that have been documented, of which 89 are critical. That means they have a CVSS of 9.010, 89 critical vulnerabilities. That means that you're exposed to a lot of potential security problems. JDK 7, obviously that's slightly newer, so there's a little bit lower number here. But still, if you stopped updating your system when Oracle stopped providing free updates, you are exposed to 306 vulnerabilities, of which 41 are critical. And if it's JDK 8 and you haven't updated since update 202 in January 2019, you're exposed to 151 vulnerabilities, of which 1 is critical. So just to summarize then, basically, OpenJDK is really identical to Oracle. The migration process is straightforward. The fact that we have the TCK to give us the ability to test and verify that what we can provide is identical to Oracle. then you know that the migration process is going to be straightforward. It's a drop-in replacement, no need to change any code, no need to modify anything or recompile any code. What we offer from Azul is an alternative to Oracle with maximum level of security, maximum level of stability, maximum level of flexibility, but at a much lower cost than Oracle. So really, that's all I wanted to say in the webinar. So I'll throw it open. I think we have about 10 minutes left for questions. So if people have questions, very happy to answer those.
So from Ajay has any questions. Ajay, you can unmute and ask the question.
Yeah, hi Simon. This is Ajay, and I'm from Canara HSBC Life Insurance. While going through your presentation, I was also referring to some of the government websites where I could, identify that when you was giving a brief that in the recent past, Oracle has changed their licensing model, their approach. But at the same time, many of our government websites are dependent on Oracle platform, and they state even on the prerequisite as well. For an example, on the one website, I saw that to use their utility, the recommended Oracle version is Java 271.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
But at the same time, when I'm comparing on the Azure portfolio deck, I couldn't identify an alternative which can replace that prerequisite.
Right. So yes, you see, this is one of the problems we do see, is that there are sites like that where you quite rightly say that they say, oh, you need Oracle Java, and it's interesting that they say update 271, because 271 is one that requires a Java SE subscription, so it requires you to license Java from Oracle, which would be under the new pricing terms, which would mean you're based on the number of employees that you have for your company, which I'm willing to bet is probably quite a large number. And then when you multiply that by the number that they have for each user, you're going to end up with a very, very large number. To give an example, I was talking to one company, it was a supermarket chain. They had 25,000 employees. They had about 500 desktops that were running Java and less than 100 servers. The bill that they were facing from Oracle was $2 million a year just for the Java to run those systems, which was just ridiculous. Now, in terms of the alternatives, what we would need to do is to help the provider of that utility understand that the cost of providing Oracle Java is just not feasible given the situation here. What we can do at Azul is we can provide a like-for-like version and update of JDK. So if you had JDK 8 and you required specifically update 271, we can make that available. So we have all the builds from the previous updates that we've done. So if you wanted particularly update 271, we can provide that to you. So that is not an issue for us. So we could resolve that problem.
But just again, I'm getting more curious now that let's say you said that if we require, let's say, for an example, Oracle 271, for the sake of our discussion, then you need to customize or develop something new, or that is already something which is already available in your portfolio?
It's already available in our portfolio. Yeah, we have a content delivery server and we have all the old updates available there. So you could simply go, we need update 271, go to our delivery server, select 271 and download it. We don't have to do anything special. It's already available.
All right. And that is available on your public website or something like we need to some login or have some.
That would be through a login. So that will be for our commercial customers.
Okay. So why I'm asking this question, because let's say then I look it from that perspective that going forward, maybe 6 months down the line, 1 year down the line, that approach will get changed.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. So we can support you with all of the older versions and updates that you require. There is absolutely no problem with that.
Okay. All right. And just one more question that You were saying that one of the companies which you was talking to, they charge basis on the number of employees,
Mhm.
and that amount get significantly high. How does the Azul licensing works?
Right. Yes. So we base it purely on the number of actual machines that you use to run Java. So we would count number of desktops. We don't count how many users of those desktops. So it's not like the old Oracle licensing, which was what's called named user plus. So it wasn't just the number of physical machines. It was also if people shared a machine, you had to count all of the people who shared a machine. We simply, on the desktop side, say if you have, let's say, 100 desktops, that is exactly the number that we will go with. On the server side, we deal with the idea of cores. So we count the number of what we call vCores. So if you're running in the cloud, it's the number of vCores. Or if you're running on a physical machine on premises, then, for example, if you're running hyperthreading, that would be 2 vCores per physical core. And then we just add that up. Now, we don't need an exact number because the way that we do our pricing is in bands. So we do up to 250 vCores is one price, 250 to 500 vCores is another price, and so on. And then we base it on that. So it's designed to be as flexible as possible, and it's also designed to be fair in terms of like the pricing that we give, so that you're not having to count exactly, down to the last 2 or 3 cores or whatever to make sure you got the right number. And if that changes over time, it's not a problem for us. We do not audit in the same way that Oracle does. So once we've agreed a price for the contract, then that is the price of the contract, and we're not going to come back and say, okay, we need to check how much you've used, and if it changes, we're going to have to charge you more. So it's all about trust.
All right, thank you. That answers.
Thank you, Ajay.
Simon, a
Anybody?
connecting question on this. So you mentioned that your licensing is based the number of machines which we do use. Uh, so basically in our organization there are 100 users, if you take as an example, but out of that 100 users, only 10 needs Java users. So do we need 10 licenses from Azul, or do we need 100 licenses in that case?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Okay, my question was that you took an example of if our organization has 100 machines, then
Yes.
instead of the number of users, we need 100 licenses. My
Yes.
question is that if we have 100 desktops, but out of that only 10 desktops uses Java, in that case, do I need 10 licenses or do I need 100 licenses?
Right. So you would need the number of licenses would be the actual number of machines, not the number of users. So if you had 10 machines, 10 licenses.
No. My question was a little different. I'm saying if I
So
have 100 machines, but out of that only in 10 machines I need Java. So then,
Oh, I see. Yes. Yeah. In which case, no, it's only the machines that use Java. So you wouldn't have to pay for the machines that don't use Java. So if you only had 10 machines out of 100 running Java, you only pay for 10.
got it. Thanks.
Any other questions? They can raise their hand.
just one more question, Akshay. That let's say, how does the support part works? Let's say any of your client globally is using Azure product, and they face any technical compatibility or the application is not working.
Mhm.
Of course, being as in the vendor of Azure and having a support, I hope that we need to raise some ticket. Then the developer get in touch with that. They identify
Mhm.
the issue. They might be providing some fix or some upgrade. That's how it works.
Yes. So
Right.
we have a very highly skilled support organization. We have a support organization that's spread around the world, so we can do 24/7. We have, in fact, our biggest support organization is based in Bangalore, so fairly locally to the Indian market, and we have 100% customer satisfaction rating. People really like our the response that they get from our support team. We're very good. So if you log a support ticket, we have an SLA that says that we will respond to acknowledge that the ticket has been raised within 1 hour. Obviously, we can't guarantee fix the problem in an hour, but we will acknowledge that we've received it, and then we will work on it to make sure that we can get that problem resolved as quickly as possible. And we do have, again, in terms of the skill set, it means that if there's a problem deep in the JDK, we can fix that ourselves. We don't have to wait for Oracle to do it. We don't have to wait for the community to do it. We're actually able to do that, and we have done it in several situations happens for some of our larger customers, people like Workday or Salesforce. We have done specific bug fixes for them.
Right. Okay.
Thank you, Ajay. Thank you, Angur. Any other questions?
Deepak here. Okay. So I have one question, sir, with respect to the licensing perspective of OpenJDK and only using JRE or JDK application alone here. So what is the difference with respect to the licensing perspective here?
Right. So yes, the JRE, you can think of it in exactly the same way as JDK from a licensing perspective. All the JRE is a subset of the JDK. It was introduced originally to make the deployment that you had for running Java applications smaller than the deployment for developing Java applications, hence the Java Development Kit versus the Java Runtime environment. From JDK 9 onwards, the JRE doesn't really exist. Because you use a different technique for shrinking the size of the runtime. But from a licensing perspective, the JRE is treated in exactly the same way as the JDK. We can make the JRE available to you as part of our builds. So if you did want to deploy the JRE rather than the JDK, you can do that. But again, from a licensing perspective, the counting is the same.
Okay. So licensing, like counting perspective, it will be same user-based license and core-based license for JRE
Yes.
and JDK, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And will that be the pricing difference if we go alone with the particular JRE or JDK licensing, or we are going with the bundle of OpenJDK here?
Yeah. So if you go with the build from Azul, then the pricing is based purely on the number of desktops and number of vCores. And
Okay.
whether you use JRE or JDK doesn't make any difference to us.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Deepak. Gulshan, you want to add anything?
No, I don't think, Simon, thank you for this session. And Akshay, I think we should follow up with all the participants
Yeah.
and probably set up meetings where we can go and meet them or do a Teams call and take the next steps from here.
Yeah, sure. So thank you so much for joining in. We really appreciate all the support and all the time that you've taken up from your busy schedule. Thank you so much, Simon, for the wonderful session, and thank you, our audience, for having a very interactive discussion. We hope that you found today's discussion really valuable, and you've gained some insights into how Silverleaf Solutions and Azul can help your organizations navigate the challenges of the current economic landscape through strategic cost-saving measures and technology solutions. So your feedback is incredibly important to us as it helps us improve and tailor our services to better meet your needs. So on the screen, you have the QR code for the feedback form. So you either can scan it now or keep an eye on your inbox. We'll be sending you shortly. So this is the first webinar of this quarter, and we've hosted today, and we've lined a few more webinars for you. So the invitations will come subsequently, but we thought we'll just let you know. And in case you or your team members are keen to attend on how they can save cost, and any other questions that anybody has on the call, please let us know. We are always available at info@silverleafsolutions.com. So thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.